All Grit.
Hosted by Animation Tanya.
In the 10th episode of our podcast, we are in conversation with Vaibhav Bhasin, a lead product designer at Kojak. Vaibhav had a bumpy start to his career, but through his indomitable spirit and grit, powered through and made the best of that experience. He talks to us about the right competencies in demand and the mindset required to design consumer centric products. He highlights the common pitfalls product managers and MBAs should stay away from and how products should not just be viable but lovable.
Hey Vaibhav, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Animesh. Hi, Tanya. Thanks for having me here.
Hi, really glad to have you here and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me too.
So Vaibhav, the first thing which we want to discuss is the interesting career you've had so far. You did your engineering in computer sciences, and then you joined a very early stage startup, TalentPad, as a designer. And TalentPad ran out of business in 3 months, I think, and you had to find a new job again. And then you went to PepperTab, which was a prominent player in the B2C grocery space, but still a startup. And they pivoted after 10 months in where they had to downsize a little, and you had to find a job again after 13 months. So within like around 1 year of your engineering, you had to find two jobs. Now you're finding a third job, right? What was going on in your head when all of this was happening?
Actually, me coming into design was is also a very interesting story. So I didn't really know design as like a discipline existed till I actually joined college, because I'm from Kanpur and I didn't have anyone to guide me around that. So when I was in college and I started making, I'm a computer science engineer and we had to make a lot of projects and all. So all my batchmates and all were making websites and all, and no one actually cared about how they look. And that was something that bugged me a lot. So I started designing those things. I was always good at Photoshop and all those things. So I used to design my websites and even the presentations I used to do. And I started realizing the impact it creates. So it's like the aesthetic usability effect, if I may say. So if something looks good, people just perceive it's better. So I started realizing that like the professors think that my presentations are better just because they look good, or even if I don't put a lot of effort into coding or the functionality of my websites and all the applications that I made, even just because they looked good, it just started getting better response from the professors and everyone. So that's what kind of drove me to design. Then I started my own design studio in college, and I started making posters and websites and apps for different college societies and small startups and all. And I think that's how I kind of build my portfolio. So I got placed in one of the MNCs in college, and since all my friends were going there, I thought that I'll go there and have a nice career trajectory, like what normal people have. But then I think I got an offer from TalentPad, and I decided to go there. It was a big decision for me because I had to convince my parents around that too. And startups were not that big a thing that time, so my parents didn't know anything about this culture at all. And I had to leave something which is safe and reputed to go for something that works out of a garage. So that kind of a thing was there. But I think I convinced them somehow. Salaries definitely helped. They were fancy that time. um, Going to TalentPad, I think the best thing that I got there were a lot of mentors. There were a lot of very smart people there, and I actually learned a lot from them. Even if it was for just 3 months, I think I learned something that I wouldn't have learned in years in an MNC or something like that. So after TalentPad, actually, they pivoted to something very different, and we all had to look for a new job. So it actually struck me very hard because I thought that okay, I had already given up on that MNC opportunity, and now I have to go and find a new job. I had already told all my friends about it, and it was like I I was very scared about what was going to happen. But I think in those few days when I was actually looking for a job, I realized what the market and what the demand of such skills is. So I saw that okay, there are a lot of startups which are hiring designers. I started getting offers, and I think in just a few days I had so many offers, and then I decided to go for PaperTap. So I think in that time where this entire thing, I could have just gotten scared and went away and gone to probably an MNC or changed back to being a developer or something like that. But I stuck with being a designer, and I think it paid off in the end because I realized the importance of the skill set and the demand in the market for it. And similarly, when I was in PaperTap, we worked there for 10 months. It was an amazing team. We built products which had such a large user base. It was totally customer centric. And building a design which impacts so many people is actually really, really fun. So yeah, I think you just have to believe in what you think you're good at or what you love doing. And I think it will work out in the end.
So probing a little bit more, you said that you burned your hand twice, right? Startups, designing, and both of the times your company had to leave you or you had to leave the company. So why not pivot to something like being a developer in an MNC or something like that? Why? What stopped you? What made you think that I should try this again?
Um, so yeah, I think this was a pretty interesting choice for me because I was a developer and I actually loved coding. So when I even joined TalentPad, I was telling my CTO that I actually want to try my hand at everything. I want to try front end, I want to try back end, I want to do design as well, and I think I can do all that. I can juggle all this, and slowly I'll probably explore which part I like the most and go from there. But what he told me was like, you can either be a jack of all trades or a master of one. And that's when I decided that it's probably better for me to go for something that I love doing because I don't want to wake up every Monday and think that, oh shit, I have to go to work. So doing something you love actually makes that part a lot easier. I know it was a big risk because I personally think that I was not that great at design that time. So I learned slowly, but yeah, I think having good mentors and just believing in yourself does the job.
Great. So now this question we usually keep for the end, where we ask our guests for actionable advice for MBA students who are preparing for roles that our guests have expertise in. But what is quite unique about you specifically is that even though you don't have an MBA, but you often end up interviewing and hiring a lot of MBAs, right? So
Mhm.
I just want to know from you what competencies are in demand right now, according to you, and what should someone enrolled in MBA right now focus on and build during the course?
Mhm. So I work with a lot of product managers to be very specific. So and I hire a lot of them as well. So I think the first thing that I look for anyone I'm hiring, be it a MBA, be it a product manager, or even a designer, is their ability to question. So whenever someone throws a problem at you, before even thinking about how to solve it and um, what other solutions are possible things that we can explore, the first thing is that whether this problem is even worth solving or not. The why of are we solving this problem is very, very important. Like you'll be surprised that if you start asking this why question to every problem that is thrown at you, there will be so much clarity that you'll get. And there are so many things that are not even worth solving. So you need to understand the need of a problem, or you need to actually go dive deep and understand what is the real crux of it before actually jumping into solutions. So I think that's the first thing that we focus on. Another thing that is very important is are we solving this problem for? What is the impact that it's going to create? And when I say who are we solving it for, it's not just the end users. There are so many stakeholders that are involved in everything that you'll do. There will be the business, there will be the partners, there will be vendors. In our case, there will be drivers. So there are so many people who are involved in one problem that you're solving. A manager or even a designer needs to have that wide holistic view of things, that a small change that you're making is actually changing so many gears, and how are they actually working out in the end is something that we need to consider. You need to set goals and you need to understand the need of each of these gears in your entire engine and then figure out how it works. So yeah, I think that is also important. Another thing which I feel is very, very specific to product managers is that the product manager actually binds the entire product team together. So a very important aspect in their character is to have that confidence to stand up for what they believe in or what their team believes in. So you have to be like that rock for your team. You have to not sway every time a hippo comes in and throws their opinion. So sorry to just throw in jargons like that, but hippo means like highest paid person's opinion. So if my CEO comes and says that, okay, I don't like this design, or I don't think that we should build this, and my entire team has been working on this for months and has put so much effort into it, then the product manager should actually stand up to the CEO, because there will be junior people in your team, there will be senior people, there will be people who are introverts and probably cannot speak up their thought process that fluently or that confidently. So yeah, I think PM actually needs to stand up for the team and be that rock. Which I'm not saying that you need to be so resistant to change. You need to be open to change, but you need to still stand up for what you believe in, rather than just going with whatever someone else or someone senior tells you to do. Available approach.
Okay, so when we zoom out now, right, moving from Gojek to the industry and what is going on right now, how integrated and design and product are, right? Because people follow this philosophy of fail fast, create a lot of MVPs, saturate the market, and depending how the consumers are behaving, change your products accordingly. So will that change? Because in MVPs, we don't see a lot of design happening.
Mhm. So, as you said, like how integrated are product and design, I think again depends on the stage of the company that you're working in. But in Gojek and the past few companies that I've worked in, it's actually a very core part of the process. So in Gojek, I think product managers and product designers are like best friends. It's just that the focus is a little different. So product manager focus a little more on the business and the vision of the product, and you can say a designer is like the champion for the users, and we care a little more about the user needs and all. But the entire workflow is that the product manager and designer work hand in hand. And when it comes to MVPs, I think this is a topic which is very close to my heart, because I don't personally believe that MVP works in a market like we are right now, where using technology is not like a barrier anymore. It's second nature. And for the next billion users, I think they're gonna like come up with using smartphones and whatnot now. So in this kind of a market where your users are just used to having these awesome experiences around them, an MVP doesn't really work for them. So again, it's all very subjective and depends on what kind of product it is, or what kind of use case, or what kind of industry you're working in. But let me explain it to you according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid. If you map it to users' needs, the on the base of the pyramid, you'll have a product which is functional. Then it will be reliable. Then it will be usable, and then the top of the pyramid, it's a pleasurable product. So the MVP mindset is trying to fill this bottom up. So you start creating by something which is very functional, then you think about reliability, usability, and pleasure is something that most of the people skip it out because it's too late till you reach there. So how I think a lot of companies have taken this approach of building lovable products now. So we call it minimal lovable products. And in this kind of thought process, you start filling this pyramid sideways. So even the first cut of whatever you build has some part of functionality, some part of usability, reliability, and actually is pleasurable to use as well. So such kind of products actually are more sticky to the users, because when they use it, they take something back with themselves. They feel good about using it. So yeah, I think that is very important. We need to kind of move from building these just viable products, because in a market where there are such awesome experiences around you, viability is not enough. You need to have something which is lovable, which is pleasurable to use.
I think that's really interesting what you said. Now, I want to dig a little bit more into the industry that you are involved in, and right through your experience at Pepper Tap, Locus, and now as a lead product designer at Gojek, what clearly stands out as a common thread is your affinity towards designing logistics and centric products. So, what are some of the challenges that this industry brings forth from a UX perspective, and why do they excite you? Why are you here?
I think I just like moving things around. So it started with Paper Tap, where we were moving groceries. So the challenges there were very different. We were trying to build a habit of buying grocery online, because 5 years back nobody used online grocery purchasing applications, and the entire behavior was very discount driven. In India, I think a lot of behaviors are still discount driven, but now we are slowly understanding the convenience aspect of it. In Locus, the challenge was very different. We were removing all kinds of stuff. We were working with various businesses and trying to help them with their logistics. The challenge there was we had to actually go inside an industry which was had very legacy systems there. So there, actually a lot of work was done manually. People used to have big maps on the walls and they used to put pins on it to plan their deliveries and so on. So to actually make these non-tech savvy users and warehouse managers understand the importance of technology and make technology firstly usable for them, because again they are not very accustomed to all these complex technological processes and all that, and some haven't even used laptops and mobile phones that much. So you had to create a product which is very, very easy to use and still does all these complex calculations and planning and everything, right? So you had to create this kind of product and make these users understand that this is going to help them be more productive and not really is like a thing that might take their jobs away. So you had to create that kind of a sense. So what we kind of did was that made these products very familiar to them. So say for example they were used to doing a lot of stuff on Excel sheets, and say from a UX standpoint we think that having maps on the screens and having glowing markers there was the best approach to do it. So we created like a hybrid kind of interface, which still gives them the comfort of using an Excel sheet and all those orders were there and you can see them. But slowly and slowly, we'll try to show them the value of using these advanced tools and then slowly move to them. So it's like a gradually, like you teach a child, you first teach them the alphabet, then you teach them letters, then words, and so on. So it's just like that. And coming to Gojek, I think the challenges are immense. So firstly, they come with scale. We have millions of orders running every day, millions of users, and every user is different. And now we have expanded to so many countries, and every country brings itself with itself new problems, culture, background, how tech savvy people are. Everything affects it. Even the height of the buildings affects how accurate the GPS is, or the traffic in that area. Everything affects how the experience of someone taking a cab from point A to point B is going to be, how frictionless it's going to be like. So yeah, a lot of problems come with scale, come with culture and all. And I think the core crux of it and how we tackle it is by understanding our users. So we invest a lot in research. So whenever we have to build something new, firstly we try to observe how our users do it in their current natural habitat, if you may say, and we observe how what challenges do they face and try to pinpoint the challenges which are worth solving and which are probably the core pain points of our users. And when we target those, I think then we build a product which is sticky and which actually helps our users in their day-to-day lives.
It'll be amazing if you can talk a little bit more about those challenges that you're talking about, because Gojek is in, multiple Asian markets. So what are some of the challenges that you observed and how do you go about addressing them?
A recent project that I did is actually pretty interesting. So yeah, because even I didn't think that okay, these kind of insights can be drawn from there. So Gojek, we do a lot of branding with our drivers. So our drivers have branded helmets, branded jackets. Currently, we're doing a lot of safety measures because of the pandemic. We are giving them face masks and face shields. So we want our users to be safe and feel safe while using Gojek. So all these mandates are there, but it's very hard for us to track whether the drivers are actually following these mandates or not. Whether if you're in a car, did the driver offer you a sanitizer, or was there a water bottle in the car, or what kind of services, whatever mandates we create, are they being followed or not? Because operationally, checking every ride is not possible. So I thought that, when we discussed this, the first thing that came into our head is like, why don't we ask our users? Every time a user is taking the ride, we can give them an option to give us feedback and report if there is anything missing or if they want to give any other feedback to us, right? But for so if we go for in a very straightforward manner, what we'll do is basically build a survey form and just ask our users these questions. We'll ask them, is your driver wearing a helmet? Yes, no. Is your driver wearing a face mask? Yes, no. This is how a lot of companies in India are doing this, and it is seemingly working for them, right? But when we actually talk to our users and analyze the market we are building it for, we realize that people in Indonesia are not very comfortable in giving feedback. Even if we build a nice survey for them, we won't really get feedback because there is an apprehension in them in giving feedback. So the top two reasons of not giving feedback that we found out from our qualitative research was that people actually feel that their feedback is gonna result in the drivers getting penalized, which they don't want. And the second was that they don't really want to get confronted by the driver for the feedback that they're giving. So they don't want to get into a fight or get into an argument with the driver. So these reasons actually change the whole dynamic of how this product has to be designed. So when we had to design a product or a feedback form for them, we had to make the theme very friendly. And we had how we did it was that we created a very nice friendly theme with the driver's image, and it felt like the driver is actually asking for feedback to improve his services, or Gojek is asking for feedback to improve the services and make the trip safe for both the user and the driver, because the driver should wear a helmet for safety and they should wear a face mask because it's in terms of everyone's safety, right? So we had to create an entire theme around it. So a normal survey form doesn't work in this kind of a place. So yeah, it just speaks for itself that you need to actually understand what your users' motivation to do a certain thing and what the inhibitions to do a certain thing are.
Talking about more when it comes to consumers and Gojek, right? You have more than 20, 25 products through which you serve your consumers. Now, was becoming a super app always in Gojek's vision? And how important were consumers when it comes to the journey of Gojek?
So journey started in actually 2010. It's been 10 years. We just finished our anniversary recently. So I have been in Gojek for just 3 years. So I've heard this story many times that for the first 5 years till 2015, Gojek didn't even have an app. They worked out of a garage, and it was just like a call center where people used to call, or BBM, or yeah, BlackBerry used to be a thing then. So they used to message and just order an ojek. Ojek means like a motorcycle or a two-wheeler scooty there in Indonesia. So they used to order an ojek and go to places. So for 5 years, it worked this way. But in those 5 years, our team realized that people had started using these services for different things. We started as just a riding or a taxi service, but now people are actually sending our drivers to get their movie tickets, or sometimes to get something from the grocery store, or sometimes even send their children to school. And these kind of things actually made us realize that there are certain more needs for our users. And that's when we diversified our products. So now when we launched our app in 2015, it was not just ride hailing. We had a product called GoSend, which helps you send packages from one point to another. And now it's been used intensively by small and medium companies. And actually they are sending, like even housewives are sending food stuff around. And there are Instagram resellers who are using our delivery platform to send their packages and all. So slowly, as we realize that there are more needs, and we already have this huge partner network and huge driver network. So we tried to utilize what we already have to actually fulfill the needs that our users have. And that's how slowly products started to evolve. And now we have over 25 plus products. So yeah, I think what worked out for Gojek, I think after 2015, in 1.5 years, we became a unicorn, and now we are a decacorn. So what worked out for Gojek was that the focus was always to solve for what needs our users have. We didn't really start just throwing products in the air because we wanted to build them. So we saw an opportunity, we saw a need, and we tried to fulfill that. So when your entire model and when your entire focus is on customers, then your product actually becomes very useful for them as well.
Now, there was a very interesting article that I was reading recently that talked about how product design is more of an evolution than a revolution. And, because traditional designers are evolving and becoming connected with other disciplines these days. So, and the article further went on to kind of describe how, in order to be a good product designer, you have to know more than just the design and the composition principles. Now, with that in context, what, according to you, is the most important thing when it comes to designing products?
So, firstly, I think product designers with time actually found the correct word to actually envelop everything that they were doing, because the roles actually changed over time. Earlier on, people used to call themselves UI designers, UX designers, UI UX designers, and they are still there. But product designers is a discipline which actually contains a lot more stuff, because designers now have like the seat at the big table. They actually influence a lot more than how just your app looks or how it works. They influence the overall direction a company is going in, how user centric the entire company is the what is the roadmap of the product and a lot of other stuff. So product design is not just about composition or visuals or UX, as you may say. Um, it contains a lot of aspects of business strategy and how this product is actually going to turn out, say, 5 years from now. So all those things combined make a product designer. So um, our job is not just around working with various disciplines inside design, such as creatives and all, to get the product out, but we actually sit with business and analytics teams and all the other disciplines involved, and then we figure out what is going to be the strategy and what is the roadmap of our product going to be like. We are involved in setting the OKRs of the company and all those things as well. One thing which I feel product designers need to actually now start focusing on is that earlier on the focus was all around aesthetics, usability, and all, but now we are getting ahead in the market, and now the experiences around us are getting more and more human, more and more awesome. So a lot of time what happens is that in between all these stringent deadlines and release cycles and all, we sometimes lose focus on what we need to create these designs for and what should be like a benchmark of a good design. There's a very popular quote by Steve Jobs that says that design is not what it looks like, it's how it works. But the actual quote was that design is not what it looks like and feels like, design it how it works. So this feel aspect is what I think is missing nowadays. We focus on the usability part, we focus on the aesthetics, but we forget about how this is going to make our users feel. And we are designing for humans, so the design needs to be human as well. So we as designers and as product managers need to evolve from just creating usable interfaces for our users who just want to do some tasks. It's not just that. We want to make our users feel something and have create a product which actually makes impact in their lives and which they want to come back to. You cannot always create a product which is driven by discounts and whoever throws more money, the users go there. You want to create loyalty. You want to create the fanaticism like what Apple has, like people lining up, or what Jordan sneakers have, that whenever they release, people are just sitting there for days to just grab them, right? That kind of fanaticism and that kind of loyalty is only created when you make your users feel something, when there is a deeper meaning attached to your product and you're not just getting them from one place to another. It's not just about creating something which is frictionless and which is usable. You need to do more because you're designing for humans and we are actually driven by emotions.
Do you think, just like you said, design is supposed to create fanaticism? So, a well-designed product, as an example of Jordan sneakers, they are relevant since 1980s. So, does a good design prolong the life of a product?
Yeah, definitely. So there are actually, Don Norman actually said that there are three levels of design. Okay, so there is the visceral design part, which is totally around aesthetics and what your visceral responses are. So whenever you see a bright light or something which is very harsh on your eyes, you don't like it, right? That is your visceral response. But when you see something which is very soothing or very calm music, you actually like it. So these are your visceral level responses, which you actually see right off the bat. It's like love at first sight kind of thing. Then there is behavioral design. And in this, it is all about usability. How effortless or how easy something is to use. How enjoyable is the experience of, say, using a well balanced knife to cut something. So that is all around behavioral design. And the third part is reflective design. Reflective design actually revolves around what is the impact of the product to your thoughts, how it makes you feel. So when you say talk about Jordans, it's they are good looking shoes for sure. And but when it comes to the behavioral design part, right? There are much more comfortable shoes in the market in that price point. Jordan sell for thousands of dollars at times. Why is that? Because when you wear a Jordan, it says something about yourself. It makes you feel like part of a bigger culture. So that entire thing which revolves around how wearing a Jordan, the confidence that it gives you or how it makes you feel, is the reflective design part. When you say Gojek in Indonesia, it's not just something which takes you from one point to other. We do so much for the drivers, we do so much for the economy, and now Gojek is a brand which actually makes you feel that, okay, this is something that is doing something for the country. Or say, for example, when you talk about Google, it's not just a search engine anymore. It's a brand which makes you feel that, okay, whatever product that Google will roll out will have a certain level of quality. Or similarly with Apple, like maybe the next iPhone is not that great, but there are so many fans which will overlook all these minor problems or usability issues because they know that, okay, Apple is a brand which means something. It means something for their stature and means something when you hold an iPhone and walk in a room. So yeah, it's that. So there are three levels, and when all these level actually think of like a Venn diagram. There is visceral, there is behavioral, this is reflective, and at the center is a delightful product. So you need to actually balance these out and then create a product which people love.
Now coming to the heart of the piece, uh, what was the hardest decision you ever had to take till now in your career?
Mhm. I think it started when I actually just began my career. So I had to choose between something which I'm very comfortable and good at, which was coding, and go for something which I love, which is design. I was not confident at all about design that time. I was a terrible designer. I didn't even know the tools that time because apparently in the industry everybody was using a Mac and using softwares like Sketch and all, and I was still stuck at Photoshop. So there was a big learning gap for me there, but I knew that I loved solving problems. So whenever someone took me to a whiteboard, I've had incredible mentors over the years, and they've taught me a lot. So every time someone took me to a whiteboard and we were brainstorming problems, solutions to problems, and all that, I think it just made me feel so good that I had to go with design. It was a hard decision for me because it was out of my comfort zone, but then I think it paid off in the end. So yeah, I know a lot of people say that doing what you love, do what you love, and you will never work a day again in your life. And I think it's you can't stress that enough. It's actually really true.
Wow, I think that was incredible. And, before I ask you the last question, I want to thank you for coming to the podcast and talking to us. It was a very, very insightful and fruitful conversation. And I think most of us, when we think about product designers, we're always thinking of it in terms of aesthetics and we don't go beyond that. But it was, very insightful to kind of learn from you that it is about the whole development process. It's you also have to worry you think about how the users finally react to the product, how easy is it for them to use it. So it's a whole journey that you have to take care of, not just the aesthetics part. So thank you, and thank you for the advice that you gave us to the people who might be aiming for roles like that. And like you said, you have to take the risk in the beginning, perhaps, where you're trying to go for something unconventional and you're like, will this work for me? Will this not? But if you genuinely are investing and you like and love doing what you're doing, I think that's going to pay off. So I think your journey is a perfect example of that. So thank you for being here and talking to us. Now we are at the end of the podcast, and we leave the last 2 minutes for you to tell us anything interesting or exciting that you've been up to in the last couple of months, and it could be anything professionally or personally.
Okay. So professionally, I've been actually working on a very cool product right now. It's called Go Transit. It's a new product in Gojek where we're actually trying to integrate public transportation in Jakarta with the Gojek ecosystem. So now you can say book a bus ticket and a bus ride, and it is actually all around multimodal experiences. So what a multimodal experience is, that say you have to go from point A to point B, you can take multiple modes to go there. You can take a scooty to go to, say, the bus station, and then from there you can take a bus, and then again maybe you can walk to your office. So all those kind of multimodal experiences are actually very bumpy right now because you have to book tickets separately and you have to use multiple apps. So we want to actually make that experience frictionless and delightful for our users. What do you do when you're on a bus? Maybe you're in a metro and you miss your stop. So those kind of things and those kind of problems we are trying to solve now. So yeah, a lot of nuances in it. Will be the app is already live, but we're already improving it, and there's a lot more to do in there. I'm actually going to move to Indonesia next year, I think by January or Feb, to actually be on ground and realize what problems are there, talk to our users, and actually figure out. I think this makes me very excited about the prospects in the coming future. I hope this Corona thing gets over soon so I can do that. Um, personally, I think I've been at my hometown for about 3 months now. So I'm spending some time with my family. I brought my dog here from Bangalore, so we're having a good time. Also, I'm spending a lot of money on sneakers these days because I don't have to pay rent anymore.